Keir Simmons is joining us from Dubai. Christine Romans is with us as well. But I want to start, of course, with Courtney Kube, who is watching that alongside us. So some news there, I think, to a degree. Ballistic missile attacks from Iran are down something like 90%. I think retaliatory drones were down something like 80%, which gives you a sense of the landscape on the battlefield on the ground. You heard the defense secretary repeatedly talk about the decisive action, that they feel like they are advancing decisively here, that there's enough munitions. What else stood out to you here? Because there's a lot.
Yeah, there were a couple things from the secretary that stood out. Number one, he and this was similar to what he said in the briefing yesterday. He said, we've only just begun to fight.
Yeah.
And I just find that such interesting language when we keep asking about any kind of a sense of the scale, the scope, the length that this war may last, and to use that kind of language. Another thing, and this is something he also said, but it was a little finer today, is that he has given the U.S. military maximum authorities on the battlefield.
Yeah.
That really opens up the question what he means by that. Because remember, the U.S. military is one who really prioritizes not inflicting civilian casualties. And so I don't know what he means by that. I think that's something that we need to follow up on. It's curious to me. He has spoken a lot about unleashing the warfighter and not having them, as he has put it, stupid rules of engagement. So some of the facts that we got out of Admiral Cooper, the commander of CENTCOM, as you mentioned, we heard about the attacks being down. The U.S. has now sunk over 30 ships.
Do you think that's a result of Iran starting to run out of munitions? Do you think this is a result of just
it's probably launchers. They're hitting. The U.S. has hit a lot of their launchers.
Okay.
They just physically can't launch things anymore. But one thing they have been able to consistently do is drones. And so interestingly, he said that the U.S. has hit an Iranian drone carrying ship. So we hadn't heard that yet. Also, like, this is something that we've been watching, we've been expecting, but Admiral Cooper directly laid it out that the U.S. is explicitly targeting Iran's ability to produce more missiles and drones, saying that he's going after Iran's industrial base. So that's another one. Again, we expected that. The other thing that I was a little surprised that he said is Admiral Cooper said that the U.S. is targeting headquarters and people who attack protesters. So to date, we have been hearing about the U.S. focusing on the military, the Iranian military and their missiles. We had not heard about them specifically targeting individuals. That seemed to be something that the Israelis were more focused on.
That is a super interesting point. You also heard the secretary talk about how the president, he gave the president a lot of credit for leading a lot of this here, too. Unsurprising, perhaps, to hear from the defense secretary. Court, thank you very much. Keir, let me go to you, because something else that we heard from the secretary, and you heard it at the end there, this conversation that you and I have been having over the course of the last several days here, which is Iran's attacks on other countries as well. And you heard the secretary say that what Iran is doing by targeting these allied countries is pulling them into the American orbit, which I think speaks to part of the escalation of war in the region here, too, Keir.
It does, and Arab countries like where I am in the UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia are furious with Iran. I mean, they've never been allies of Iran, obviously. Some have been more understanding, I think you could say. I mean, the Qataris, for example, share a gas field with Iran, so that's inevitable. The Omanis, but they're all really not happy with the way that they've been targeted. The Prime Minister of Qatar had a conversation with the Foreign Minister Araghchi, who Tom interviewed earlier today, of course, and it wasn't a happy conversation. And the Prime Minister put out a statement, the Qatari Prime Minister afterwards put out a statement absolutely refuting the Iranian claim that it is only targeting bases in this region, for example. So there's lots of talk that it's backfiring on the Iranians. Whether the Iranians think that is a different question, because I think potentially Tehran has a different goal, which is to cause as much chaos as possible, inflict as much pain as possible on America's allies and partners, and just see whether or not it can upend things and just make life more difficult for the US, to the point that the US kind of begins to shift its posture.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or watch live on our YouTube channel.